In our last story, we left Joseph in the prison of Egypt, forgotten by the chief butler who had promised to remember him. Joseph had accurately interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's chief butler and baker, but despite his faithfulness and wisdom, he remained imprisoned. Today, we continue this incredible journey, where Joseph's life takes an unexpected turn as God's plan for him unfolds. Let us dive into the next chapters and witness how Joseph's faithfulness leads to his rise and how he becomes a central figure in the preservation of his family and many nations. 2 full years passed, and Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had 2 troubling dreams. In the first dream, he saw 7 healthy, fat cows come up from the river, followed by 7 thin and ugly cows. The thin cows devoured the fat cows but remained as gaunt as before. In the second dream, Pharaoh saw 7 full and good ears of grain grow on one stalk, followed by 7 thin and scorched ears. The thin ears swallowed the full ears. Pharaoh was deeply troubled and summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt to interpret his dreams, but none could. Then, the chief butler remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about the young Hebrew prisoner who had accurately interpreted his dream. Pharaoh quickly called for Joseph. After being cleaned and dressed, Joseph was brought before Pharaoh. Pharaoh explained his dreams, and Joseph humbly replied, "It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." Joseph explained that the dreams were one and the same. God was showing Pharaoh what he was about to do. The 7 fat cows and the 7 good ears of grain represented 7 years of great abundance in Egypt. The 7 thin cows and the 7 scorched ears represented 7 years of severe famine that would follow. Joseph advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee the land and store up grain during the years of plenty to prepare for the famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom, Pharaoh declared, "Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?" Pharaoh appointed Joseph as the second in command of Egypt, giving him authority over the entire land. Joseph was given fine clothes, a gold chain, and Pharaoh's signet ring. He rode in a chariot, and people bowed before him. At 30 years old, Joseph was entrusted with the task of saving Egypt from the coming famine. As the famine spread across the land, Jacob sent 10 of his sons to Egypt to buy grain, keeping Benjamin, the youngest, at home. When the brothers arrived in Egypt, they bowed before Joseph, not recognizing him, but he immediately recognized them. Joseph spoke harshly to them, accusing them of being spies. The brothers denied the accusation and explained their family situation, including the youngest brother, Benjamin, left behind. Joseph decided to test them, imprisoning them for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph released them but insisted that one brother, Simeon, remain in custody while the rest returned home to bring Benjamin. The brothers admitted to one another that they were being punished for their guilt concerning Joseph, not knowing he could understand them. Overcome with emotion, Joseph wept but kept his identity hidden. Joseph secretly returned their money in their grain sacks, causing them great fear when they discovered it on their journey home. The famine continued to worsen, and Jacob's family once again ran out of food. Jacob told his sons to return to Egypt to buy more grain, but Judah reminded him that the Egyptian official had firmly warned them not to return without their youngest brother, Benjamin. Judah said, "If you send Benjamin with us, we will go and buy food. But if you don't send him, we cannot go, because the man said he won't see us unless Benjamin is with us." Jacob, distressed, asked, "Why did you even tell him you had another brother?" The brothers explained, "The man asked us detailed questions about our family, about you, and if we had another brother. We simply answered his questions. How could we know he would demand us to bring Benjamin?" Judah then promised Jacob, "Send the boy with me, and we will go, so we can all live and not die, including you and our children." I will take full responsibility for him. If I don't bring him back, you can hold me accountable forever." Reluctantly, Jacob agreed and said, "If it has to be this way, take some of the best produce we have left, balm, honey, spices, myrrh, nuts, and almonds, as a gift for the man. Also, take double the money, along with the silver that was returned in your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take Benjamin, and may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, so he will release Simeon and let Benjamin return. If I lose my children, I lose them." The brothers set off for Egypt with the gifts, the extra money, and Benjamin. When they arrived, Joseph saw Benjamin with them. Overcome with emotion, he instructed his steward, "Take these men to my house, prepare a feast, and have everything ready for noon. They will dine with me." The steward brought the brothers to Joseph's house, but they were afraid. They said to one another, "We are being brought here because of the money that was returned in our sacks. He's going to accuse us, attack us, and make us his slaves." At the entrance to the house, they approached the steward and explained, "Sir, we came here before to buy food, but when we stopped to rest and opened our sacks, we found our money returned to us. We've brought it back, along with more money to buy food. We don't know who put the silver in our sacks." The steward reassured them, "Peace to you, don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, must have given you this treasure. I received your payment." Then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward brought the brothers into the house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided food for their donkeys. They prepared their gift for Joseph, knowing they were about to meet him. When Joseph arrived, they gave him the gift and bowed low to the ground. He asked how they were and inquired about their father. "Is he still alive?" They replied, "Yes, our father is alive and well," and they bowed again. Joseph looked at Benjamin, his only full brother, and asked, "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" He said to Benjamin, "May God be gracious to you, my son." Overwhelmed with emotion, Joseph quickly left the room to weep in private. After composing himself, Joseph returned and ordered the meal to be served. He was seated separately from his brothers, as Egyptians would not eat with Hebrews, which was considered improper in their culture. The brothers were seated in order of their birth, from the oldest to the youngest, which amazed them. Joseph had food brought to them, giving Benjamin 5 times as much as the others. They feasted and drank together, enjoying the meal and each other's company. After Joseph's brothers enjoyed their meal with him, they prepared to leave for home with the grain they had purchased. However, Joseph gave his steward specific instructions. "Fill their sacks with as much food as they can carry," he said. "And put each man's money back in the mouth of his sack. But take my silver cup and place it in the sack of the youngest, along with his money." The steward did exactly as Joseph instructed. Early the next morning, the brothers set out on their journey, unaware of what had been done. Not long after they left the city, Joseph called his steward and said, "Go after those men. When you catch up to them, ask them, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? This cup belongs to my master, and he uses it for divination. You have done wrong.'" The steward chased after them and delivered Joseph's message. The brothers were shocked and said, "Why would you accuse us of such a thing? We brought back the money we found in our sacks from our first trip. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If the cup is found with any one of us, let that person die, and the rest of us will become your slaves." The steward replied, "It will be as you say, except only the one who has the cup will become my servant. The rest of you can go free." The brothers quickly lowered their sacks to the ground and opened them. The steward searched each sack, starting with the oldest and ending with the youngest. To their horror, the silver cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Overcome with grief, they tore their clothes in despair. They loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. When they arrived at Joseph's house, they threw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph demanded, "What have you done? Don't you know that someone like me can uncover the truth through divination?" Judah spoke on behalf of his brothers, saying, "What can we say? How can we defend ourselves? God has uncovered our guilt. We are now your servants, all of us, including the one who was found with the cup." But Joseph replied, "Far be it from me to do that. Only the one who was found with the cup will become my servant. The rest of you can go back to your father in peace." Judah stepped forward and pleaded with Joseph. "Please, my lord, let me speak. You asked us if we had a father or another brother, and we told you about our father, an old man, and our youngest brother, who is the only surviving son of his mother. Our father loves him deeply. You told us to bring him to you so you could see him. We explained that our father would be devastated if the boy left him. But you insisted we could not see you again, unless we brought him. When we returned to our father, we told him everything. Later, when he asked us to buy more food, we reminded him we couldn't go back unless Benjamin came with us. Our father said, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One is gone. I haven't seen him since. If you take this one too, and harm comes to him, it will bring my gray hair down to the grave in sorrow. Now, if I return to my father without the boy, his life is so closely tied to the boy's, that he will die. I made myself responsible for the boy. I promised my father, if I don't bring him back, I will bear the blame forever. So, my lord, let me stay here as your servant instead of the boy. Let him return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father without the boy? I cannot bear to see the sorrow it would bring upon him." Joseph could no longer hold back his emotions. Overwhelmed with feelings, he ordered everyone but his brothers to leave the room. Once alone with them, he broke down and wept so loudly that even Pharaoh's household heard him. Turning to his brothers, he revealed, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers stood in stunned silence, unable to respond. They were terrified at this unexpected revelation. Sensing their fear, Joseph called them closer and said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. But don't be distressed or angry with yourselves for what you did. God sent me here ahead of you to save lives. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and there are still 5 more years to come without plowing or harvesting. God had a plan, to use me to preserve our family and deliver us from disaster." Joseph continued, "It wasn't you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father figure to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Hurry back to my father and tell him that his son Joseph is alive and has been made lord of all Egypt. Tell him to come to me without delay. He will live in the land of Goshen, close to me, along with all of you, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, and everything you own. I will provide for you there, for the famine will continue for another 5 years. Otherwise, you and your family might lose everything." Joseph looked at his brothers and said, "You can see for yourselves that it is really me speaking to you. Even Benjamin, my own brother, can confirm this. Go tell my father about all the honor I have been given in Egypt and everything you have witnessed here. Bring him back quickly." Joseph then embraced Benjamin, weeping as he held him close. Benjamin also wept on his brother's neck. Joseph kissed each of his brothers, crying with them, and finally, they began to talk openly with him. News of Joseph's reunion with his brothers spread quickly to Pharaoh's palace, and Pharaoh and his officials were pleased. Pharaoh instructed Joseph, "Tell your brothers to load their animals and return to Canaan. Let them bring their father and their families back here. I will give them the best land in Egypt, and they will enjoy the abundance of the land. Also, have them take wagons from Egypt to transport their children, wives, and father. They don't need to worry about bringing their possessions, for the best of all Egypt will be theirs." Joseph's brothers followed Pharaoh's instructions. Joseph provided them with wagons, food for their journey, and gifts. He gave each brother a new set of clothes, but he gave Benjamin 5 sets of clothes and 300 pieces of silver. For their father, Joseph sent 10 donkeys loaded with the best goods of Egypt and 10 female donkeys carrying grain, bread, and other provisions. As his brothers prepared to leave, Joseph urged them, "Don't quarrel on your way back." They traveled back to Canaan and told Jacob, their father, "Joseph is alive. He is the governor of all Egypt." At first, Jacob couldn't believe them. But when they shared all the words Joseph had spoken, and he saw the wagons Joseph had sent, Jacob's spirit was revived. Overcome with joy, he exclaimed, "It's enough. My son Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die." After the joyous news that Joseph was alive and well, Jacob, now called Israel, began his journey to Egypt with everything he owned. On his way, he stopped at Beersheba and offered sacrifices to God, the God of his father Isaac. That night, God spoke to Jacob in a vision, calling his name, "Jacob, Jacob." Jacob replied, "Here I am." God said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I will go with you to Egypt, and I will bring you back again. And Joseph will be by your side when you die." With this reassurance, Jacob set out from Beersheba. His sons carried him, their families, and all their possessions in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent. They took their livestock and all they had acquired in Canaan and made their way to Egypt. Jacob's firstborn, Reuben, had 4 sons. Simeon had 6 children, including one by a Canaanite woman. Levi had 3 sons. Judah had 5 sons, though 2, Er and Onan, had died earlier. Issachar had 4 sons, and Zebulun had 3. All the descendants of Leah, including Dinah, numbered 33. From Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, there were 16 descendants, including Gad's 7 sons and Asher's 5 sons, plus their sister Sarah. From Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, there were 14 descendants, including Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, born in Egypt, and Benjamin's 10 sons. Finally, from Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, there were 7 descendants, including Dan's son Hushim and Naphtali's 4 sons. In total, 66 direct descendants of Jacob came to Egypt, not including the wives of his sons. Adding Joseph and his 2 sons, the entire family numbered 70 people. Jacob sent Judah ahead to meet Joseph and find the way to Goshen. When they arrived in Goshen, Joseph prepared his chariot and went to meet his father. As soon as Joseph saw Jacob, he embraced him tightly and wept for a long time. Overcome with emotion, Jacob said to Joseph, "Now I can die in peace, knowing you are alive and well." Joseph reassured his family and explained the plan. "I will go to Pharaoh and tell him that my brothers and my father's household, who were in Canaan, have come to me. I will tell him that you are shepherds and that you have brought your flocks, herds, and everything you own. When Pharaoh asks about your occupation, tell him that you and your ancestors have always been keepers of livestock. This will ensure that you can settle in the land of Goshen because shepherds are considered detestable to the Egyptians." Joseph's careful plan aimed to secure a peaceful and prosperous place for his family in Egypt while maintaining their livelihood and heritage. The family was finally reunited in the land of Egypt, setting the stage for the fulfillment of God's promise to make them a great nation. After arriving in Egypt, Joseph went to Pharaoh to inform him about his family's arrival. He explained, "My father and my brothers have come from Canaan, bringing their flocks, herds, and everything they own. They are now in the land of Goshen." Joseph then selected 5 of his brothers to present to Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked them, "What is your occupation?" They replied, "We are shepherds, just as our fathers were. We have come to live in this land because the famine is severe in Canaan, and there is no pasture for our flocks. Please let us stay in the land of Goshen." Pharaoh agreed and said to Joseph, "Your father and brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle them in the best part of the land, in Goshen. If there are any capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." Joseph then brought his father, Jacob, to meet Pharaoh. Jacob blessed Pharaoh, who asked him, "How old are you?" Jacob answered, "I am 130 years old. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not compare to the years of my ancestors." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again before leaving his presence. Joseph gave his father and brothers a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best part of the land, near Ramesses, as Pharaoh had instructed. Joseph provided food for his father, his brothers, and all their households. The famine worsened, and there was no food in all the land of Egypt and Canaan. People spent all their money to buy grain, and Joseph collected the money for Pharaoh's treasury. When the people ran out of money, they came to Joseph, pleading, "Give us food. Why should we die just because we have no money?" Joseph told them, "Bring your livestock, and I will exchange food for your animals." The people brought their horses, flocks, herds, and donkeys, and Joseph gave them food in return for their livestock. When the next year came and the famine continued, the people said, "We have no money left, and our livestock is gone. All we have are our bodies and our land. Buy us and our land in exchange for food, so we can survive. We will become Pharaoh's servants, and you can take our land." Joseph agreed, and he bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. The people became Pharaoh's servants, and Joseph moved them to cities across the land. However, he did not buy the land of the priests because Pharaoh provided for them, and they did not need to sell their land. Joseph told the people, "I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Here is seed for you to plant the land. When the crops grow, you must give 1/5 of the harvest to Pharaoh. The remaining 4 parts will be yours for food, seed, and for your households." The people were grateful and said, "You have saved our lives. We are glad to serve Pharaoh." Joseph established a law in Egypt that 1/5 of the produce would belong to Pharaoh, except for the land of the priests, which remained independent. Jacob and his family settled in Goshen, where they thrived. They acquired possessions, grew in number, and multiplied greatly. Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years, reaching the age of 147. When he realized his time to die was near, he called for Joseph. Jacob said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, promise me that you will not bury me here in Egypt. When I die, carry me out of Egypt and bury me with my fathers in their burial place." Joseph agreed and said, "I will do as you have said." Jacob insisted, "Swear to me." Joseph swore, and Jacob bowed his head in peace, leaning on his staff. This marked the beginning of the fulfillment of God's promise to grow Jacob's descendants into a great nation. The family was now united, thriving under God's care, even in a foreign land. One day, Joseph received word that his father, Jacob, was very sick. Joseph quickly took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and went to see him. When Jacob heard that Joseph was coming, he gathered his strength and sat up in bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me in Luz, in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. He promised to make me fruitful and to multiply my descendants, making them a great people. He also promised that this land would belong to my descendants forever. Now, your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you here in Egypt before I came, will be counted as my own sons, just like Reuben and Simeon. Any children you have after them will belong to you and will inherit under their brothers' names. Jacob's voice softened as he remembered the past. When I was coming from Padan, your mother Rachel died on the way to Ephrath. I buried her there on the road, which is Bethlehem. As Jacob looked at Joseph's sons, his eyes, dim with age, could barely see them. He asked, "Who are these?" Joseph replied, "These are my sons, whom God has given me here in Egypt." Jacob said, "Bring them closer to me, so I can bless them." Joseph brought his sons near, and Jacob kissed them and embraced them. Jacob said to Joseph, "I never thought I would see your face again, and now God has even let me see your children." Joseph knelt before his father, bringing Ephraim toward Jacob's left hand and Manasseh toward Jacob's right hand. But Jacob crossed his arms, placing his right hand on Ephraim, the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh, the firstborn. Joseph noticed this and was surprised, but Jacob had done it intentionally. Jacob then blessed Joseph and said, "May the God who guided my fathers Abraham and Isaac, the God who has cared for me all my life, and the angel who redeemed me from all harm, bless these boys. Let them carry my name and the name of my fathers, and may they grow into a great multitude on earth." When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim, he tried to correct him. "Father, Manasseh is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head." But Jacob refused. "I know, my son, I know. Manasseh will also become a great people, but his younger brother, Ephraim, will be greater, and his descendants will form a multitude of nations." Jacob blessed them, saying, "Through you, the people of Israel will give blessings. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." Jacob deliberately placed Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Jacob said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. I am giving you an extra portion of land, more than your brothers, the land I took from the Amorites with my sword and bow." With that, Jacob imparted his blessings to Joseph and his sons, preparing them for the future God had in store for their family. As Jacob neared the end of his life, he called his sons together for a final blessing and to share what would happen to them in the future. He said, "Come closer, my sons, and listen to what I have to say as your father." He began with Reuben, his firstborn. "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, and the first sign of my vigor, excelling in dignity and power. But you are as unstable as water, and you will not excel. You defiled your father's bed by lying with my concubine." Next, he addressed Simeon and Levi, brothers known for their fierce anger. "Simeon and Levi, your violence and anger have brought shame. In your anger, you killed men and destroyed places. Cursed be your anger, for it is fierce, and your wrath, for it is cruel. I will scatter you in Israel and divide you among the tribes." To Judah, Jacob gave a blessing of leadership. "Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the necks of your enemies. You are like a lion, strong and majestic. The scepter will not depart from Judah, until the one to whom it belongs comes, and the obedience of the nations is his. Your land will be prosperous, and your vineyards fruitful." Turning to Zebulun, Jacob said, "Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships, his border will extend toward Sidon." To Issachar, Jacob spoke of labor and service. "Issachar is like a strong donkey lying down between two burdens." He saw that rest was good and the land was pleasant, so he bent his shoulder to bear the load and became a servant. For Dan, Jacob declared, Dan will provide justice for his people, as one of the tribes of Israel. He will be like a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels, causing the rider to fall backward. I wait for your salvation, Lord. Jacob spoke briefly of Gad. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will overcome them. He blessed Asher with prosperity. Asher's food will be rich, and he will provide delicacies fit for kings. Naphtali received a poetic blessing. Naphtali is like a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns and speaks with eloquence. Jacob then gave a special blessing to Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. Though archers attacked him with hostility, his bow remained steady because of the strength of the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the rock of Israel. God has blessed you with blessings of the heavens above, the deep below, and the womb. The blessings of your father are greater than the blessings of my ancestors and extend to the everlasting hills. These blessings will rest on the head of Joseph, the one who was set apart from his brothers. Finally, Jacob spoke of Benjamin. Benjamin is like a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours his prey, and in the evening, he divides the plunder. After blessing each of his sons, Jacob reminded them of his burial wish. I am about to join my ancestors. Bury me with them in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan. This is the place Abraham bought as a burial site, where Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Leah are buried. When Jacob finished giving his final instructions, he lay back on his bed, drew his last breath, and passed away peacefully. He was gathered to his people, leaving a legacy through his 12 sons, who would become the tribes of Israel. When Jacob, also known as Israel, passed away, his beloved son Joseph was overcome with sorrow. He leaned over his father, wept, and kissed him one last time. Wanting to honor his father, Joseph commanded his servants, who were skilled physicians, to embalm Jacob's body. The embalming process took 40 days, as was customary in Egypt, and the Egyptians mourned for Jacob for 70 days, showing great respect for him. After the period of mourning ended, Joseph approached Pharaoh's household and said, "Please ask Pharaoh for permission to let me fulfill my father's dying wish. He made me swear to bury him in the tomb he prepared for himself in Canaan. After I bury him, I will return." Pharaoh granted Joseph's request, saying, "Go and bury your father, as he made you swear." Joseph set out to Canaan to bury his father, accompanied by a large and impressive procession. Pharaoh's servants, the elders of Egypt, Joseph's brothers, and many others joined the journey. They left behind their children, livestock, and possessions in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also joined them, making the group even more grand. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan River, they held a solemn mourning ceremony. Joseph declared 7 days of mourning for his father, and the lamentation was so intense that the local Canaanites noticed and said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Because of this, the place was named Abel Mizraim, meaning mourning of the Egyptians. Following Jacob's instructions, his sons carried him to Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah near Mamre. After the burial, Joseph and everyone who had accompanied him returned to Egypt. After Jacob's death, Joseph's brothers began to fear for their lives. They thought, "Now that our father is gone, Joseph might seek revenge for all the wrong we did to him." To ease their fears, they sent a message to Joseph, saying, "Before our father died, he commanded us to tell you, 'Please forgive your brothers for their sins and the wrongs they committed against you. We beg you to forgive us, for we are servants of the God of your father.'" When Joseph heard this, he was deeply moved and wept. His brothers came to him, bowed before him, and said, "We are your servants." But Joseph reassured them, saying, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God meant it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So don't worry. I will provide for you and your children." He spoke to them kindly and comforted them. Joseph continued to live in Egypt with his family. He lived up to 110 years and was blessed to see his great-grandchildren from both Ephraim and Manasseh. As he neared the end of his life, Joseph reminded his family of God's promise to bring them back to the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He said, "When God fulfills his promise, carry my bones out of this place." Joseph passed away. His body was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt, waiting for the time when his descendants would return to the land God had promised them. Thus ended the life of Joseph, a man of unwavering faith and wisdom, whose journey was guided by God's providence. Joseph's story is a testament to God's sovereignty, forgiveness, and redemption. Through trials and triumphs, Joseph remained faithful, and God's plan unfolded perfectly. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating Bible stories. Join us next time as we continue exploring the incredible journey of God's people.